You are losing to someone right now, not because they are stronger than you, not because they are smarter, but because they figured out something you never did. They figured out that your reaction is their oxygen. Every time you defend yourself, you feed them. Every time you raise your voice, you confirm their power. Every time you explain, justify, or argue, you hand them the very thing they came for. And the worst part is this: you think you are fighting back, but you are actually surrendering. There is a method, older than psychology, older than therapy, that turns their own poison back on them without a single word. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly how it works. There is a pattern you have been repeating for years, maybe decades, and you have never once recognized it for what it is. Someone disrespects you, subtly. A comment designed to sting without leaving a visible mark. A tone that says more than the words themselves. A look that reduces you. And something fires inside you. Not logic. Something older. Something primal. The need to respond. To correct. To make them see that they are wrong about you, so you speak. You argue. You explain yourself. And in that exact moment, you lose. Not because your words were wrong, but because the conversation was never about truth. It was about control. And the moment you engaged, you gave them what they wanted. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this 5 centuries ago. In The Prince, he wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, meaning people assess power not by what you do, but by what they see. And what they see when you react to provocation is someone who can be moved. Someone who can be controlled. This is not a personality flaw. This is a deeply human instinct. Your nervous system is wired to respond to social threat the same way it responds to physical danger, with fight, flight, or collapse. But toxic people are not physical dangers. They are psychological strategists, and they have learned to weaponize your own biology against you. The trap is elegant in its simplicity. They provoke, you react. Your reaction proves their influence. Their influence grows, and the cycle deepens every single time. Most people believe the answer to toxicity is confrontation. Stand up for yourself. Set boundaries. Tell them exactly what you think. And in many relationships, that works. But with genuinely toxic individuals, those who operate through manipulation, not misunderstanding, confrontation is the worst possible strategy. Here is why. Confrontation requires engagement. Engagement creates a dynamic. And dynamics have rules. When you confront a toxic person, you are not resolving a conflict. You are entering a game whose rules they wrote. They know how to twist your words. They know how to play the victim. They know how to make you feel crazy for saying something perfectly reasonable. Machiavelli observed this principle in the political wars of Renaissance Italy. The rulers who confronted their enemies directly often lost, not because they lacked strength, but because confrontation gave their opponents something to push against, a wall to climb, a stage to perform on. The rulers who won were the ones who removed the stage entirely. Think of it as fire. Fire needs 3 things: heat, fuel, and oxygen. Remove anyone, and the fire dies. Toxic behavior works the same way. The heat is their intent. The fuel is the situation. And the oxygen is your reaction. You cannot control their intent. You often cannot control the situation, but you can absolutely control the oxygen. And when you remove it, something extraordinary happens. The fire does not just die. It thrashes. It flickers wildly. It exposes itself completely before it goes out. That exposure is the beginning of their destruction, and you did not lift a finger. There is a precise psychological mechanism at work here, and once you understand it, you will never see toxic interactions the same way. Toxic individuals operate on a feedback loop. They act. You react. Your reaction confirms their model of reality. A model where they hold power, where they matter, where they can influence your emotional state. Without that confirmation, the model begins to collapse. And here is the part that changes everything. When the model collapses, they do not simply stop. They escalate, they push harder, they become louder, more obvious, more desperate. This escalation is not a sign of their strength. It is the sound of their strategy failing. Machiavelli wrote, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." This is often attributed to Napoleon, but the principle lives in the bones of the prince. When someone is destroying themselves, the most dangerous thing you can do is intervene. Because intervention gives them a new target, a new reason, a new structure to organize around. But if you hold still, if you remain silent, composed, unmoved, they have nothing to organize around. And so they spiral. This is not theory. This is observable human behavior. And it unfolds in predictable stages.
Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you reacted to someone toxic and immediately knew you had made a mistake? Name the moment. You do not need to explain it. Just name it. Subscribe if you want to keep going. What comes next is where the strategy becomes real.
There are 4 stages a toxic person moves through when you deny them your reaction. Each stage is predictable. Each stage is a test. And each stage brings them closer to exposing themselves completely. The first stage is the probe. Small comments, subtle digs. A joke at your expense that is not quite a joke. They are measuring you, testing your perimeter, searching for the crack in your composure. Most people fail here, not because the provocation is severe, but because it is ambiguous. You are not sure if you should respond. You are not sure if it was intentional. And that ambiguity is designed. It keeps you off balance. It makes you second-guess yourself. The correct response at this stage is nothing. Not avoidance, not retreat. Simply nothing. You heard it. You registered it. And you chose not to engage. The second stage is escalation. When the probe fails, they increase pressure. The comments become sharper. The disrespect becomes more open. They may involve others, spreading whispers, testing alliances, trying to isolate you. This is the stage where most people break, because escalation feels like a threat. Your body reads it as danger. Every instinct screams at you to respond, but escalation is not strength. Escalation is panic wearing the mask of aggression. They are pushing harder because the first push did not work. And if you simply hold, they move to stage 3. The third stage is exposure. This is where their mask begins to slip, because desperation makes people sloppy. They contradict themselves publicly. They overreact to small things. They reveal motivations they were trying to hide. They say the quiet part out loud. And you did not expose them. They exposed themselves. Because you gave them no resistance to hide behind, no conflict to justify their behavior, no enemy to point to. Machiavelli observed that men are always wicked at bottom unless they are made good by some compulsion. But the deeper insight is this: wickedness, left without opposition, becomes visible. It cannot sustain itself in the absence of a mirror. The fourth stage is collapse. At this point, credibility is gone. The people around them have seen the inconsistency. The narrative they built has holes too large to ignore. And you are exactly where you were, unmoved, composed, untouched. The contrast between their disintegration and your stability becomes the only statement that matters. And it is a statement you never had to make with words. But this is not merely a defensive posture. Silence, strategic, intentional silence, is one of the most powerful offensive tools in human psychology. And Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. In The Prince, he describes how Cesare Borgia conquered Romagna not through direct warfare, but through patience, positioning, and allowing his enemies to overextend. Borgia understood that the strongest move is often the one your opponent cannot see, the one that looks like inaction, but is, in reality, calculated restraint. This is what silence does. While they are consumed with trying to break you, their attention is fixed on you, and attention is finite. Every ounce of energy they spend trying to provoke you is energy they are not spending on protecting themselves. Meanwhile, you are doing something they cannot comprehend. You are redirecting your energy entirely. You are building, growing, moving forward. Not loudly, not dramatically, but consistently. And over time, weeks, months, sometimes years, the gap between you becomes undeniable. They are still playing the same game. You have left the arena entirely. And this is the deepest cut of Machiavellian strategy. You do not defeat them. You outgrow them. You make the game itself irrelevant. There is one more dimension to this that most people overlook, and it may be the most important one. Toxic individuals are, at their core, readers. They read micro-expressions. They read hesitation in your voice. They read the slight tightening of your jaw, the flicker in your eyes, the half-second delay before you respond. These signals, often invisible to you, are their navigation system. They use your micro-reactions to calibrate their next move, to find the soft spot, to know exactly where to press. But when you become unreadable, when your face reveals nothing, your body holds no tension, your voice carries no charge, they lose their map. And a manipulator without a map is not dangerous. A manipulator without a map is lost. This is when their behavior becomes chaotic. They try aggression, it bounces off. They try charm, you are unmoved. They try guilt, you remain neutral. Every tool in their arsenal fails, not because the tools are broken, but because they cannot find the target. And here is the final irony. The less you give them, the more they give you. Because their chaotic attempts to regain control reveal everything. Their insecurities, their motivations, their weaknesses. Information you never asked for, delivered freely, because they cannot help themselves. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. The wise response to manipulation is not to out-manipulate. It is to become ungovernable, to make yourself a surface upon which nothing sticks. But there is something you need to understand before this strategy becomes real for you. Something that separates the people who try this and fail from the people who try this and transform. Silence is not suppression. Read that again internally. Let it settle. Suppression means you are still at war. Only the battlefield has moved inward. You clench your jaw and say nothing, but inside you are screaming. Inside you are rehearsing arguments. Inside you are consumed. That is not power. That is a pressure cooker. and pressure cookers eventually explode. True silence, the kind that makes toxic people destroy themselves, comes from a place that most people have never visited. It comes from genuine indifference, not performed indifference, not the kind you fake while your stomach churns. Real indifference, the kind that emerges when you finally understand one devastating truth. Their behavior was never about you. It was never a commentary on your worth. Never an accurate assessment of who you are. It was always a projection of their own unresolved pain, their own insecurity, their own desperate need to feel powerful in a world where they feel powerless. If something just shifted in you as you heard that, if you felt even a small release in your chest, a like puts this in front of someone else who is still trapped in the cycle. That is all it takes. And once you see their behavior for what it truly is, a mirror of their suffering, not yours, something remarkable happens. The anger dissolves, not because you forced it away, but because there is nothing left to be angry about. You were never the target. You were just the nearest surface they could project onto. And when you understand that, truly understand it, you do not need to try to be silent. Silence becomes your natural state because there is nothing to respond to. Understanding is not enough. Insight without practice is just entertainment. So here is how you build the internal foundation that makes this strategy sustainable. Not for a day, not for a week, but permanently. The first practice is the separation of stimulus and response. The next time someone says something designed to provoke you, do not respond for 5 full seconds. Not because you are calculating your response, but because you are watching what happens inside you. Feel the impulse rise. Feel the heat in your chest or the tightening in your throat. And then do nothing with it. Simply observe it. That 5-second gap is where your power lives. In that gap, you are no longer a reaction machine. You are a conscious being choosing your next move. And that choice, that tiny, invisible choice, changes everything. Do this once and it feels strange. Do this 10 times and it becomes easier. Do this 100 times and it becomes who you are. The second practice is energy auditing. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. Where did my energy go today? Not your time, your energy, your emotional investment, your mental bandwidth. If a toxic person occupied your thoughts for 2 hours, that is 2 hours of your life force they consumed without earning and without deserving. Track this. Write it down. Because when you see the cost in concrete terms, hours of your finite life, the motivation to reclaim that energy becomes visceral. Then ask the follow-up question. Where do I want that energy to go instead? Name it. Your work, your health, your creative projects, your relationships with people who actually nourish you. Redirect consciously, every day, until the redirection becomes automatic. The third practice is identity anchoring. Toxic people attack your sense of self. That is their primary weapon. They make you question your worth, your perception, your reality. And the only defense against this is an identity that does not depend on external confirmation. So define it, not in abstract terms, in concrete, specific terms. What do you value? What do you stand for? What kind of person are you when no one is watching? Write it down, not as affirmation, as declaration. And when someone tries to tell you who you are, through insult, through manipulation, through projection, you have something solid to return to, something they cannot touch, something that exists independent of their opinion. Machiavelli said the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. The same principle applies to you. The quality of your inner circle, including the relationship you have with yourself, determines how much external toxicity can reach you. Build that fortress inside yourself, not against the world, but for yourself. You began this with a feeling, that slow burn under your skin, that urge to defend yourself against someone who was never interested in hearing your defense. Now you understand what that urge actually was. It was the bait. And every time you took it, you handed your power to someone who had no idea what to do with it, except waste it. The strategy is not complicated. Remove the oxygen, hold your ground, let the 4 stages unfold. Watch the collapse happen on its own timeline. And while it does, redirect every ounce of energy you use to spend on them back into your own life. This is not about winning against them. It never was. It is about becoming someone they cannot reach. And when you become that person, not through force, not through confrontation, but through the quiet, relentless work of knowing who you are, something happens that no strategy could ever manufacture. They become irrelevant, not because you defeated them, but because you outgrew the need to. Machiavelli spent his life studying power. Who holds it? Who loses it, and why?
But the deepest lesson buried in all of his work is this: the person who needs nothing from you has everything over you. That is the foundation. That is the strategy. That is the truth you carry forward from this moment. So what happens when you stop feeding the chaos? When you refuse to defend, refuse to explain, refuse to engage with people who were never listening in the first place? They do not suddenly become kinder. They do not apologize. They escalate. They test harder. And then when nothing works, they move on. Because toxic people are not interested in you. They are interested in the reaction, and without it, you become invisible to their hunger. This is not cruelty. This is not revenge. This is boundary without explanation. This is power without performance. You do not need to destroy anyone. You just need to stop building the stage they perform on. And the moment you do, you will realize something profound. The peace you were searching for was never on the other side of winning the argument. It was on the other side of ending it. If this resonated with you, subscribe for more forgotten strategies from history's sharpest minds. And tell me in the comments, what is one toxic pattern you are ready to stop feeding today?